Hello, Pastor Rick, Journey of Faith Baptist Church. I'm glad you stopped by today. Where we live, in Colorado, we're coming to the end of a time where we're to shelter in place. On the 26th of April, we're supposed to be done with this, and we're supposed to gradually move back into a new sense of normal. Now, it may not ever be normal like we knew it before, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. So I thought, in my meditations, was there a time when people were ready to get out and get away from their captivity? Was there a time in the Bible represented that people wanted to get out and get away, but then eventually they wanted to go back to the old way of doing things? Friends, let me tell you, my experiences in life are that when God takes us into a new place in a new way, He doesn't intend for us to go back. When He saves us from our sin, He doesn't want us to go back to that lifestyle. Why would we ever want to go back to slavery? The people I'm thinking of in the Bible are the Jews, the Hebrews. In Exodus, the Exodus is a wonderful, amazing event God used to take down a world power for a very simple and humble people, but they were His people. They had to go into a new normal. They had to experience a new normal. The Hebrews, or the Jewish people, had experienced 430 years of slavery. That means that generation after generation was born and died in slavery. It became a part of their culture, part of their society. It was their normal. And even though they hated it at times, well, let me explain. I believe they hated it all the time. They still had the remembrance of a promise. The way I see some of this is God has brought the world to a slowdown, almost to a standstill, to get our attention, to take us to a new normal. And the new normal for the Hebrew people was going to be a great thing. God promised them it was going to be a great thing, but they didn't believe God all the time. I want to ask us, are you afraid of what this new normal will look like? For some, do you want to go back to 80 hours a week, slaving till late at night, barely seeing your children? As a matter of fact, letting somebody else raise your children while you and your wife work and struggle to have the American dream? Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with the American dream. To provide and to do better for your children than you had done for you, or to make a good life for you and your family. Those are very solid and foundational things for our heritage and our culture, but what I've seen of our culture is that we became slaves. Slaves to having bigger and better things. We're never quite satisfied until we have more. And then we validate ourselves by what we have, whether it's money, cars, homes, titles, education. The Bible tells us to be satisfied. But are we ever satisfied? When I'm thinking about the Hebrew people, their culture, they were a people who were enslaved and trapped in a land that wasn't theirs. They wanted to get out. It's maybe not unlike us being trapped in a home or sheltered in place, told to do something, and we kind of resist and we rebel at that. We do that because we want to be good citizens. And don't get me wrong, I love to stay home. There are times when I just need that home time, that time to open my Bible, or that time to just relax, that time to do some chores around the house, because I take pride in what what we've accomplished in our life. And I'm sure you have too. But by gosh, out here in the West, you tell us to stay home, and then that's the last thing we want to do. When we're told by somebody else not to do something, that's exactly what we want to do. The Hebrew people were going to be released by God. In Exodus, Moses was called by God. At first, Moses was a failure, but God brought him to a place of humility and then used him greatly to lead people out of Egypt. He brought down a world power. He ruined their economy. He cast down their false gods. And Pharaoh was considered to be a god on earth, and he was no match for the God of heaven. After health was crushed and society was broken down, after their agriculture was ruined, after their ways of making money and a living were taken away from them, the Egyptian people not only were willing to let the Hebrew people go, they did everything they could to coax them out. As a matter of fact, they paid the people whatever the people asked for. The Egyptians gave. So the Hebrew people plundered. The Bible says the Hebrew people plundered the land of Egypt on their way out. Now, on your way out, wouldn't you think this is awesome? But it's a little scary. We're heading out into the desert. We're heading away from what we've always known. But we're so happy to be out of captivity. And God was going to bring them to a new normal, but God had to bring them to places where even their faith had to be grown through a little bit of suffering. Now you would think if you saw 10 plagues and you saw a world empire, a superpower brought to its knees, wouldn't you think that you would believe absolutely and fully in the God of heaven? They didn't. They saw the wonders and they saw the miracles, but miracles rarely turn somebody to God where they are completely sold out to who God is and surrender their lives and their love and their heart to Him. Usually it's not very long, and then they tend to go back to their old ways. Let me read just a few scriptures to you, because you've already got some of my commentary. Starting in Exodus chapter 12, verse 29, and it came to pass all at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. This is the 10th and final plague. People were dying. People were dying in Egypt. And the rulers finally had to bow the knee, even Pharaoh. Pharaoh, who sat on his throne to the firstborn, the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive, who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. So Pharaoh rose at night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Then he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, Rise, go out from among my people, both you and your children in Israel, and go, serve the Lord as you have said. Also take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone and bless me also. And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, and having their kneading bowls bound up on their clothes, on their shoulders. And now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses. And they asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Moving over, chapter 12, verse 40. Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, on the very same day it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night of solemn observance to the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord, a solemn observance for all the children of Israel throughout all generations. This was a people that was going to begin a new normal. They didn't even know what that was. All they know is that they were led out of their captivity, and they were being led out. They were excited to be out. And as we know from the rest of the story, they'll suffer a little bit in the desert. Their faith will be tested, and tested very shortly. So as we get to a point where we're ready to branch out of our homes and begin our businesses and begin to shop, and our nation begins to recover, remember this time that you've been in. It's a time of solemn remembrance, for the Lord has done something good through it. Perhaps you need a little distance so you can look back and you can see in 2020 vision, and you can see the good that the Lord has done. Don't desire to go back to the old way of doing things. God has a special plan and a special purpose, and He is going to deliver you and me to a new normal. Let's be brave, let's be courageous, and let's go out and be a part of the healing of our land. I'm Pastor Rick, Journey of Faith Baptist Church. God bless.